Hello again, everybody. I'm Bill Rudman from the Musical Theater Project with our 11th edition of Let's Go to the Movies. It's going to be a film that's it was made just 2 years before State Fair, which we ran 2 weeks ago, and it could hardly be more different, which is our specialty, to make them different. We're going from the rural to the very urban. It's Stormy Weather, starring Lena Horne, Bill Robinson, Cab Calloway, Fats Waller, and more immortals. And here comes my usual spiel. If you're a first timer, read the instructions on the screen so you will know how to participate by asking questions or, even better, making comments. Debbie Schinker, Joanna May Cullinan, and Heidi Lang are holding down the fort as usual. And I'm so pleased to welcome as my special co-host tonight, Treva Offutt.
Good evening, everyone. I'm so pleased to be here with you all.
We're so pleased to have you. You know Treva from her work on The Song Is You, our concert and cabaret series. You know her from her work all over town as a performer and director. And Treva, I loved what we did with the preview on this movie. I mean, we were together. We were this bundle of dynamite.
Yes, it was a great deal of fun for me as well. It's always wonderful to see the piece, and to be able to share it with you was quite an honor. I mean, I was honored that you asked me to participate in such a way. I said, oh, I am with Mr. Rudman on this one.
Oh, now. But Treva, before we open it up, just kind of remind us what makes Stormy Weather such an important film.
Well, Stormy Weather is an important film because it is a time capsule of sorts of a collaboration of artists who really didn't get the same kind of exposure and ability to have the longevity of a career as many of their counterparts. They inspired many, but because of the politics of the time, they were unable to be able to share in a way that maybe we could have seen more of what they had done. It sort of whets your appetite and makes you excited and want to know more about these artists.
That's for sure. So, there's very little story in this film. It's really just sort of the on-again, off-again romance between Lena Horne and Bill Robinson. But who needs a story when you've got acts like this? And Treva, you're an expert on African-American dance, I know. Remind us what styles of dance we see in this movie.
There are multiple dance forms that are highlighted. And of course, you'll recognize tap. And within the tap, you will see soft shoe, sand dancing, bucking. Of course, Bill Robinson developed this whole signature style of working with stairs. And you don't just see the small stairs he does, you end it with the giant stairs that Nicholas brothers go up and down so incredibly in Jump and Jive. And there's also, relating to the Nicholas brothers, flash dancing, which is their combination of ballet, tap, and acrobatics. And in addition, you have modern dance and inflection of African dance as well.
So for those of you who have not had the time to see the whole film so far, Treva's given you about 14 good reasons to see it. And how about hearing it? I mean, this is jazz vocal at its best, and primarily jazz vocals rooted in the swing era. Mm-hmm. So you might just remind us what that sounds like, swing era jazz.
Diddy bobby, bum, diddy bob, daddy dee bob, boom, dum dee oh, da daddy da dee da hidey ho.
Yeah, see, you can do anything. It's true. Okay, well, let's open it up to some questions and comments from you guys. Blanche Valancy says to everyone on chat, yes, the dance.
Yes.
And Treva, you'll be happy to know that Ellen Greenberger says to everybody that amazing end dancing sequence by the Nicholas brothers on the big steps was the most amazing dance routine I have ever seen. Yeah.
Yes, and it is credited as one of the greatest dance sequences ever caught on film.
Yeah.
The other thing is that, you know, not as familiar with the history of tap. Tap originated as a mixture of the Irish jig and African dance in the Five Points area, which is now the Wall Street area of New York. And they were first generation Irish and newly freed blacks who got together, and they would trade dance moves, and tap evolved. And actually vaudeville was dying out, but tap became this sensational new form, and it extended the form for many more years.
And Catherine in Cleveland Heights says that she loved the costumes. You want to comment on the look of this show in the costumes?
Yes. Well, one of the things that was really important, another part of what was important about the film, was to see people at their best at a time when they were portrayed as being their worst. And so I'm always blown away by the amount of quality of the costumes. I think that everyone should have an opportunity to dress in such a way at some point in their lives, and I think that it's kind of that magical Cinderella moment for many. But to see people dressed so elegantly, African Americans in particular, to see them dressed so elegantly was such an uplifting representation, and so crucial to the time period as well.
Yeah, indeed. And really, the production values for this whole film are outstanding, I think.
Yes.
You know, who do we have?
Blanche and Jack have raised their hand.
Okay.
No, she says no.
No, they've not raised their hands. Debbie Schinker raised.
Judy and Bruce have a question, but I have one too, and I can't raise my hand as the host.
Okay.
I had never heard of sand dancing, but I saw Fred Astaire do it in one of the early movies that we did in our series. Yep. And I wondered whether Bill originated that or whether that was a form even before him, because I had never seen it before Fred, and I just thought it's amazing, and it was so similar.
Always a place to put his hand.
Yes, there were many times where there were assimilations of forms, and I know that sometimes sand dancing was actually done in a sand, like a small flat box. I got to perform once with a sand dancer, which was really fun, and so he was actually within a very small amount of space, but he was creating these incredible rhythms and melodies going back and forth. I'm not sure about the beginning origin of when that came about, but I loved the fact that Bill, who again was 65 at the time, just came out casually, threw some sand down and started grooving. And I just thought that was in its element, and it could be a really great explanation of how it developed, you know?
Well, we know, Treva, that Astaire was heavily influenced by Bill Robinson, so it's quite possible that Bill Robinson developed that. It really is. Blanche and Jack are with us now.
Well, hello. Actually, now that you mention it, let's consider the context. The film was released in 1943. Hollywood was making films for the war effort.
Yes, they were.
And so this was a showcase of talent. And among other things, note the service members in the audience, and the dialogue, the motivation was, well, we're doing this show for the soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So this was, within the broader cultural context, was part of the war effort.
Most
Even
definitely.
though ironically, the soldiers were segregated during that period.
Yes.
But this was directly an attempt to increase the recruitment of Black soldiers. And again, there was that promise that you'll have greater freedom when you return, which was, of course, not true. But there were the segregated forces. And But they really played up, this is my war buddy and we're in this together and there's this camaraderie and this energy and all these opportunities. And so that was part of, what they were working towards. Propaganda, definitely, and recruitment.
Anybody
Hetty.
else?
Hetty Milgram.
Actually, it's Mike
Hetty's
who has the question. Hi.
Oh, hello, how are you doing?
Good, how are you?
So my question is, could you tell us something about the producer and the director, what their backgrounds were, and whether they had made any similar movies or how this project fit into what they were doing?
Yeah, Treva and I are both kind of looking at each other because I don't think either one of us knows very much about either one of them. I really don't. If you excuse me, I can go find out. I can Google them. But I guess the point is not A-list people, but extremely accomplished in terms of what they produced for this film. Somebody's going to Google it while we're talking about it.
Yes. I was going to say that I thought that one of the strongest points of it was that they were able to showcase what they had already done and put it in. And that's part of why the storyline was so loose. But whoever did it, whoever put it together and hired these people to come together relied on the strengths of their already existing body of work, as opposed to now we're going to learn this and we're going to do that. But they brought in acts that already existed and highlighted what they had developed.
And holding that all together was challenging. The screenwriter for this movie, very important figure, Ted Koehler, who wrote with Harold Arlen, and one of their greatest and most important songs was Stormy Weather, in fact. But it's Ted's screenplay. Here's a question about the Nicholas brothers. You may know this, Treva, I don't at all. They did so much jumping and falling. Did they have arthritis and joint problems in later life? They kept performing until very late in life, didn't they?
Yes, they kept performing, and they worked with emerging tappers. I know that Gregory Hines was someone who studied with them as well. And there were a whole new generation of tap dancers and people interested in tap because of seeing that footage. And they were more than open to being able to be available to teach and to share. They did have hip issues and other things as they got older. And it's something that even Prince, who used to drop down into splits when he did his work, we now know that he had developed some serious hip pain and leg pain from doing those types of things. But again, almost in the way that Buster Keaton started so young, literally his parents' act was to throw him into the audience. He was used to, and that's I think it was Charlie Chaplin. His parents, he fell down the stairs, and when he popped up as if he was fine, he said, "What a buster," So that was one of those things that they just grew up doing, and part of that acrobatic sort of daredevil approach was something that one, set them apart, but two, there was no precedence to say, maybe you should stretch it like this or do it that way. So definitely later in life, they had some issues with that.
Sarah May has a really good memory. She's asking if the Nicholas brothers appeared in Francis Ford Coppola's Cotton Club film, and yes, they do. It's just a short bit, but they are in there. And here's something, Treva, you should enlarge on. Wayne Wensky is wondering about the distribution of the film in its original release. Did it get as wide a release as a typical release, or was it primarily seen in large cities, particularly northern cities, which will give you a chance to talk a little bit about what happened to Lena Horne?
Yes, it was mainly in the larger northern cities. And again, part of the disservice to these artists was that either their work was taken out of context or simply taken by other artists and imitated in formats where it seemed like they were not the ones who originated what they did. And because of what was going on in the time period, they did not have as wide of a distribution. I think that people would have been amazed had they seen these artists in context and in their true artistry. Lena Horne talked a lot about the indignities of traveling, and whether it was with her nightclub act or with other productions, where she just was not allowed to, you know, I used the quote in the preview about her saying that you couldn't get on a certain bus, but they would ask you to sign your autograph. And it's interesting, I just watched Green Book, and just, you could perform, but you couldn't eat, you couldn't use the bathroom, you couldn't come in through the front door. And actually Catherine Dunham at one point stopped a performance because she said, until the people in the audience are going to sit with people who look like the people on stage, I'm not going, they had asked for an encore, and she said, I will not do an encore.
Yeah.
And these were some of the change makers who really made a difference in being able to integrate audiences. Whether even Marilyn Monroe really supported Ella Fitzgerald and other vocalists, and were trying to get them, and Dorothy Dandridge, trying to make sure that they were able to have the dignity of human beings and be treated as equals.
And you know, I know you know this classic story, Treva, about Lena Horne, when she appeared in Cabin in the Sky, which is a film that we'll be showing in this series, and you'll be back here with me for that. She has a great scene and a great song in a bubble bath, and directed by Vincent Minnelli, and it's beautifully shot, but that scene was cut from all screenings in the South. Just terrible. The Amsels have their hands up.
Hello.
Hello.
Much better lighting, Bruce, than in the old days. Thank you.
Judy and I were really impressed by the stormy weather scene. They put a lot of effort and probably a lot of the budget into that. There was a great deal of action, and I mean, it was raining and people were running around. Although I did notice that some of them costumes were actually getting wet, which is, you know, other than in Singing in the Rain, they usually would have the rain in front of them. But that, we were just amazed by that, and the entire dream sequence that went with it. Now, I have a question.
Okay, sorry. I was going to say it's like a piece into itself, isn't it?
Yep,
yes,
it is.
When I looked over the cast and crew on IMDb, the crew was all white. To your knowledge, was there ever any problems between the crew and the actors?
Not that I have heard of. I think that in terms of what they were hired to do at that time, they realized that they were there to be able to support the artists. And I know that, for instance, there were, speaking of the costumes, I was just saying to Bill, Catherine Dunham's dress was actually designed by her husband, who was a costumer and happened to be white. And so there were the mixings of people who were like-minded and were supportive. And if somebody had difficulty, you know, there was actually that time period, you really didn't say a whole lot because you were trying to get it done. And so there was only so much you could say, because again, there were only 2 all-Black films, musicals done in the 40s and only 1 in the 50s. So there was only so much leeway you would have to be able to complain. And then if you look at, say, for instance, some of the things that Judy Garland talks about on the set of The Wizard of Oz, as a young actress, there's just, it was Hollywood, you know? So I'm not sure about that. I haven't read as much about the behind the scenes of that aspect.
Yeah. Another hand up from Stephen Bell. Stephen
there.
Bell?
Yes,
Oh,
hi.
okay. Hi.
I was just wondering, as I'm watching this, who is the audience that this film is intended for? Is it meant for white audiences, or is it meant for colored audiences? Because there were some scenes, like the one in the nightclub, where some of the characters seemed to be actually caricaturing themselves and making fun of themselves, that jittery dance and the falling over and all that kind of stuff. Was that meant, like who is this meant for?
What do you think, Treva?
I believe that it was meant more for colored audiences, and again, as a celebration, but again, as a recruitment, you know, to be able to recruit people to the war effort. And it's also, you know, in terms of, it's really nice to see yourself reflected in a very positive light. And these were well-known performers within the Black community, the colored community. So to be able to celebrate them on screen was a treat. And I think that in terms of, you know, we talked about this a little bit with Shuffle Along. I think that also those people who were keeping an eye out on what's the next thing, what's going to happen, they were watching the movie also to get ideas because that happened quite a bit.
Yeah. How about the Myers? I think they've had their hands up for a long time.
There, I'm unmuted. Comment earlier about the war effort. So I did a little reading about Bill Robinson. He was in the Army in 1898, Spanish-American War.
Yes.
He got accidentally shot by one of his officers.
Yes.
And,
yes.
and he was in World War I, as portrayed in the movie, but as an entertainer rather than as a soldier. And so, you know, they took a few liberties. I guess recruitment wouldn't have been so great having a Spanish-American War veteran promoting it. A little old for that. But anyway, it was, one other thing about Bill Robinson, you know, this Wikipedia article mentioned that he died penniless.
Wow.
What's the story behind that? Is that true?
That's what has been reported, and I know that I do know that Stormy Weather is very loosely based on his life. So, you know, in terms of his experience in the Army and et cetera, that is part of it. However, you know, a lot of times what happened is that there was mismanagement of funds, or that there was something that took place where either it was someone that they worked with who was skimming off the top, or things that they thought were set were not set. And at that time, you know, that whole idea of money management is an art unto itself. And so if you're busy thinking about the art, and you think that someone else has control of, or is taking care of you in the financial department, there are so many stories of people who later find out that that money they thought was going to be there for them is no longer. And so that might be part of what took place.
Sad ending to a great career.
Exactly.
Mark Reaney's wants everybody to know, and it's a classic scene. Treva, I'm sure you love the scene in The Pirate with Gene Kelly and Judy Garland, where the Nicholas brothers have a great specialty in the Be a Clown number. But one of them was quoted many years later as saying, you know, if it hadn't been those times, they would have been stars. They should have been stars.
Yes. And it's frustrating because when you see all of the people who were assembled for this movie and how much they were doing and how much talent they had and how infrequently you got to see them, but then you would then see their moves somewhere else or hear their music somewhere else but they just weren't cut into the pie. You know, they were cut out of it somehow. Like when they were making the pie, this ingredient, which is like the butter, is left out, and you still have the dish, but the butter is missing. And that's the part that's that's really frustrating. You know, it still happens to this day. And, you know, I remember I think it's in Dreamgirls, where there's this song about got me a Cadillac, and it starts out, got me a Cadillac, 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 and then it's slowed down to, oh, I've got me a Cadillac, Cadillac, and it's just done in a different way. Or what Elvis Presley did, or other people who just, you know, took the seed of it, and, you know, Big Mama Thornton was nowhere in the picture then.
Yeah. Hey, guess what, Trevor? You got a compliment from Carol Pred on the photo behind you. So you better tell the story which you did to us before we went on camera.
Well, this is James Vanderzee, who was an African-American photographer who actually documented the lives of the people around him. And it's such an honor to be able to see this and see people, you know, you read things and you see what's happened or what hasn't happened, but to see people living their best lives and celebrating is really crucial. And Vanderzee's photographs, you know, whether they were still lives or portraits of couples or families, were things that most Americans were not allowed to see or not privy to at that time. So thank goodness he documented a day in the life, or he documented, this is a dance studio. And as a dancer, I always loved this picture of these little girls dancing their hearts out, laughing, wearing their top hats, these dresses that they're wearing, the little patent leather shoes that they have. I mean, they're having a great time. And I think that a lot of times we talk so much about the hardships and the trials and the difficulty that we forget to celebrate the beauty and the celebration that took place in everyday life.
Yeah. We have Herb Drower with us from Chicago, as usual. I think, Herb, you've been to about 6 in a row. How did you like the film? Oh, we don't have audio from you yet.
Do you have it now?
Yes.
You do. You sound great.
Yeah, I was going to say one of my favorite performances was Dooley Wilson, but not when he did Play It Again, Sam, which is not, but he played in Bloomer Girl, and he had a wonderful song, The Eagle and Me.
Mm-hmm.
And I always loved that song. So it was such a pleasure to see Dooley Wilson play a dramatic role. He was very good.
Right.
I liked him.
Yeah.
Yes, many people were saying that they wished he'd had a song.
Yes, yes.
You know, why didn't he sing?
but he did a great job. I thought he was very well cast in this one.
Mm-hmm.
And the other sad thing about it is Lena Horne, had she been white, would have been equally important as Judy Garland or any of the other big performers. She was wonderful. Wonderful.
Treva, we should tell the story. I'll toss it to you about Lena Horne and Showboat at MGM.
Oh.
Okay.
Yes.
Well,
you know, I just wanted to go back for a second. I mean, it was really difficult at that time, you know, Lena being a Cotton Club performer. You had to be light enough to be recognized in one way, but then you were still considered too dark anyway. And that was the frustration. You're always caught in between. And in terms of Showboat, I mean, there are many instances where the inspiration for a character is not then portrayed by that character. And that was one of the indignities, whether it was an Asian actress who that role was made for them, but then it becomes Myrna Loy, or it's, you know, it was very similar for Lena Horne, you know, in terms of saying, I'm moving forward into this. And then,
well, yeah, there's another piece to the story, which is that some of you may remember MGM's movie. It was a biopic on Jerome Kern called Till the Clouds Roll By. And Lena Horne sang the songs that were the songs for Julie Laverne in Showboat, and she does them magnificently. So that was Till the Clouds Roll By. Then a few years later, MGM gets around to making a remake of Showboat. And the question is, who is going to play Julie Laverne? And everyone thought and hoped it would be Lena.
Yes.
And it went to Ava Gardner.
Yes.
And thank goodness they were good friends. And Lena was extremely generous about it, but it was one of the heartbreakers of her career.
Yes. You just knew she was going to be in there, and then they decide. It's like Singing in the Rain. You know? You got the person behind the scenes. What's wrong with my voice, right? And it just it played out over and over again. It's really fascinating, and again that heartbreak of saying, here is this. It's almost tailor made, and then it's
tailor made. Yeah, true. Who else out there has hands up?
I know Sarah May sent something in the chat there.
Oh, she did? Oh, Bill, doesn't Lena Horne perform in Words and Music? Yes. Yeah, there's another example. She had a specialty in Words and Music. She sings The Lady's a Tramp in that movie, which is a biopic of Rodgers and Hart. Yeah, MGM used her a lot in, unfortunately, small ways. And you're right, she should have been a major movie star. She had everything going for her, including true glamour. My goodness.
I got to dance many times with Carmen de Lavalade, one of the original A-League dancers, yes. And she reminded me of Lena. She has sort of a Southern drawl as well, but body-wise and the way that she moved, every time Carmen moved, all I could think of was Lena Horne.
A visual hand up from Laurel Kest.
Keep your hand up.
Oh, yeah.
Hi, Laurel.
Hi. I want to hearken back to for whom this movie was made. And Treva said that it was made for an African-American audience and white. I know that sitting watching, particularly the cakewalk, or the cakewalk scene, I was horrified. I mean, I was so upset at the blackface, mammy face, whatever it was that was on the hats.
Right.
I mean, I just stood there and said, what? And I asked Don, when was this movie made? I would have guessed 10 years earlier, but it wouldn't have made any difference. The times hadn't changed enough.
Well, look at I think the last example of blackface in an American musical is in Irving Berlin's White Christmas in 1954. So that's even 10 years later, it was still hanging around. Yeah, it's it's shameful.
As I was saying in the sort of preview, one of the things is difficult. It just kept reinforcing stereotypes. And, you know, even the colorism within the Black community of the lighter people get to do more, they have more power, they are going to excel, they get to be leads in the film. The people who are darker don't have the power, they're not able to do as much. I mean, it was just reinforcing stereotypes that had been set up outside of the culture itself. But then there was the fact that you as a performer, you had to make a choice. Am I going to do this and perform, or not do it and not get an inroads in at all? And so people who were Black people forced to be in blackface, first of all, you know, but that was a tradition that came about through the vaudeville and other things as well. And because of the way that they were traveling and touring, it became almost an accepted norm, even though it was demeaning, you know. And so this film reinforced that which is why I'm saying it was loosely based on Bill Robinson's life, but with that inflection of the time period, keeping it in the stereotype.
Mm-hmm.
Sue and Howard.
It's Sue's turn.
It's Sue's turn.
Am I unmuted?
Yeah.
Yeah, I wondered if anyone else shared this feeling. I had one frustration watching the movie. Every time Bill Robinson started to dance, it was so short. I wanted to see more. You saw the whole routine of the Nicholas Brothers. You saw a couple of full songs of Fats Waller and of course Lena Horne's solos, but it was just such a little bit of dancing. I was so excited to be able to see it, and then it was over.
Yeah. Yes. And I think that he, as a true performer, was going to do as much as he could, and they were trying to insert as much of him as they could into the various moments. But I also wonder if, due to his age, he was doing a little bit less, and also trying to highlight the younger artists that were coming up. And I wanted to say, just going back to the cakewalk for a second, the history of the cakewalk as a lampooning of white slave owners in the first place. I mean, it's so messed up. The cakewalk is a dance that was done by slaves to imitate the slave owners. Oh. And they would do it in such a way that they would try to arch their back as far as they could and kick as high, be as highfalutin as they could. And that was the origin. That is what the cakewalk is. So the fact that the cakewalk had the blackface was just, I was like, this is really something. And the thing is, it was so popular with the slave owners, they didn't understand that it was a lampooning. So they encouraged it to happen more and more, not knowing that they were being made fun of. So then it's kind of the reversal where they're doing this cakewalk, but then you've got this blackface going. So
how messed up could it be?
Yes.
Yeah. There's a really good question on the chat from John Steiger, who only asks really good questions. And probably you're going to be able to do justice to this. Can you talk more about colorism? It seemed that the women were consistently lighter than the men. Do you know if that was a typical distinction?
It was, and it's something that happened at the Cotton Club as well. The men did not have the same color restrictions as the women at the Cotton Club. And it was also seen as you wanted to get someone who was lighter than you to procreate with. That was something that was reinforced in society. And so seeing darker men with lighter women was something that almost in many ways reinforced this idea that was in Birth of a Nation, which was that Black men wanted white women, which was not necessarily what was going on. And so they were trying to get as light as they could. But, that's something that was definitely perpetuated. And it was, it was also one of those things where people were saying, well, why would she go out with him? He's so dark. Her children are going to be dark. Why would that happen? And girls their mothers would pinch their noses to make sure that they were a certain shape. They were encouraged not to go in the sun so that they could stay light as possible and have a good husband. And it goes all the way back to the plantation, where the lighter slaves were the ones who were working in the house, and the darker slaves were the ones who were in the field. And that distinction and dichotomy continues to play out to this day. If you look at a lot of the popular Black female singers, the majority of them go blonde. They just go blonde at some point in their career. And it's really something that just keeps being perpetuated.
And I didn't know this, Treva, but Michael comments that in India today, people who advertise for spouses emphasize lighter complexion as their first requirement.
Yes.
Goodness.
Yes.
Sake.
And again, if you look at procreation as the purpose of marriage, that is, you want and even, in Black society, there are certain, organizations where you have to be like, I remember in 1991 performing in New Orleans and going to a party and realizing that I was at a brown bag party, which meant no one could enter if they were darker than a brown paper bag. And so yes, yes. And so New Orleans in particular has this whole octoroon, quadroon, mulatto thing going, and the women had to wear the red kerchiefs if they were light enough to pass, just so people would know that they had mixed blood. But to be in 1990, it was actually 92, to be 1992 and realize that like the party stopped when I walked in. I was with a company that had all different shades, and I heard someone say, "It's okay, they're from out of town, they can stay." And I thought, okay, but there is that perpetuation.
We're at the point in these Q&As where we have our little feature called "Let's Get Personal," and we want to ask you a few personal questions that don't get too personal. But Treva, you want to start with the question we talked about in terms of Lena Horne and Stormy Weather?
I think that I have the same thing in mind, but I'm wondering, when I shared this with my mother, she shared with me the fact that her mother sang Stormy Weather almost every day. And I know my grandmother used to sing "Oh, What a Beautiful Morning" every day. Is there a song that you have that is personal to you that you sing and maintain, and how did it start and where did it come from? Oh, I can see Joe really thinking. He's like,
I'll start.
Okay.
You said that, and there's a song that I've been singing for 70 and 20, 50, like 49 years. And that's from here. It's a "Good Morning Starshine." I love that song, and it is just this optimistic viewpoint of the world. And I just, I'm happy today, just singing along and bibby boop booby nibby nabby nooby. I love it. And I sing it a lot. I sing it a lot to my grandkids, and they love the nonsense syllables, the scat syllables. But it's just a happy song.
Mm-hmm.
It's a happy song. And Hetty is a singer, by the way, just so everybody knows.
Sounds like it.
Player. We had another question about Stormy Weather that I think is interesting. You'll tell me if I'm wrong. Maybe it's not. But Lena Horne had this career that went on for 70 years. Mm-hmm. And it was fun for Treva and me to put together the preview in such a way that you saw her sing it in 1943, and then literally 40 years later in her one-woman show, which I saw on Broadway, and what a privilege. And she makes a point of saying that by 1982, the song meant something completely different to her. As she had grown, she saw and heard the song differently. What do you think she found in Stormy Weather in 1982 that she may not have recognized when she was 26 years old?
Jan. Oh, you're on
Jan
mute.
Roberts? Is that Jan Roberts?
Jan, you're unmuted, but try the little arrow next to your mute bar and you might be able to fix the audio. You were unmuted, but we still weren't hearing you.
No? Not happening? Well, then I'll answer my own question, okay? And this is my feeling anyway, and you guys can agree or disagree. I think, and seeing her do it live in 1982, it was as though she released an anger that she had never felt free to release until that time. Treva, would you agree with that?
I agree. It was cathartic. You know, she was able to speak her mind finally. And I think that also the difference that you have from when you're 26, you're starting out, you're trying to toe the line and make sure that you're doing what you need to do to have a career. She was really holding it in so that she could, you know, we talked about in Curtains Up at the Cotton Club, how her father's head was put in a toilet for, you know, he was put towards the back, and they actually assaulted her father when he went to see her perform at the Cotton Club. And there's nothing she could do about it. She was a performer at the Cotton Club, and that came with it, which was frustrating. So all these years later, having lived, having loved, having lost, having the indignities of what happened with Showboat, all of these things, she finally was able to say, you know what, I'm going to sing this song my way. And this song is, even though it's beautiful, it's a painful song. And I think that that's the storytelling went deeper because she was finally able to tell the story as opposed to make it pretty. It didn't have to be pretty anymore, even though it was powerful. It was incredibly powerful. But even the syncopation, what I loved about what she did, the syncopation wasn't da 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 da. She was da 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 da. And I'm gonna tell you, and and it was really the way she lived within the song itself was completely different.
Yeah, I agree. We're gonna adjourn to the diehards in just a minute, but we got to say something about jazz clubs, because jazz clubs are so important in this film. And I wonder, do any of you have memories of a jazz club that you really thought was terrific, and why? What made it terrific? Because each club had its own kind of atmosphere, I think.
Oh.
Well, I'm not going to answer exactly that question, but one thing that was fun for me in watching this is that I was of an age when swing came back, and there were all the swing clubs, and it just brought me back to when I don't know if we were married then or just boyfriend and girlfriend, but we would do some swing dancing. And all the Zoot Suit stuff was really fun to experience.
Yeah. And how about, John, before you go away, how about Cab Calloway? Speaking of Zoot.
Oh my God.
I don't know. You guys agree? He seems to me like he was the first rock star in everything he does. The way he deals with his hair and the way he moves. Singer, dancer, performer par excellence, right, Treva?
Yeah, I one of the things that always stood out to me, both whether they were television shows at the time or Cab Calloway, there was something that happened to men's hair that let you know they were invested, right? They would start out with it slicked back, but before Cab was finished, he was swinging and slinging, and it was going all over the place. And I also, you marry that with that intro that he does, where he's just coolly walking sideways, down sideways, and that strut, that sideways strut, and he would always end up sort of in a back bend, hair flying all over the place. And I just always, I love the fact that there are many cartoon characters that echo or honor him, because he had this kind of larger than life feel. He definitely did.
Yeah, sure. And we should offer as a PS about Cab Calloway that when he was pretty old, he co-starred with Pearl Bailey in the in Hello Dolly on Broadway, and that David Merrick produced, and he was extraordinary in it and beautifully matched with Pearl Bailey. Really terrific.
That was great.
I think we're at the time when we do our miscellany, and as usual, we have 4 miscellaneous items to cover before the diehards take over. Number 1 is, what's the next film? And boy, we just keep shaking things up here at the Musical Theater Project. The next film is going to take us to Sweet Apple, Ohio for the 1963 film of Bye Bye Birdie.
Oh,
And,
yeah.
And yeah, and we're going to have something to say about white suburbia when we get to Bye Bye Birdie, let me tell you. Number two, interesting results from the survey that we took the last time. You guys made me feel really happy when you sort of said overwhelmingly that you would be willing to pay for some of these films that are only available on Amazon. And that's great because that gives us a lot more freedom in choosing those films. So thank you for that. Three, our very important message that we share every week, and here it comes. If you enjoyed the session, we hope you're going to continue by making a donation of $20 in honor of our 20th anniversary, or, and we always add this, or at any level that's meaningful to you. And number four, finally, a lyric by one of tonight's songwriters, and there were a lot of different songwriters in Stormy Weather, but we want to single out a name you may not know. The great lyricist Andy Razaf, who wrote lots of songs with Fats Waller, including Ain't Misbehavin' and The Joint is Jumpin', and this, I think it's a little piece of poetry, which was closely associated, not so coincidentally, I chose it for this reason, very much associated with Lena Horne, and Treva is going to do the honors.
Every honeybee fills with jealousy when they see you out with me. I don't blame them. Goodness knows, honeysuckle rose. When you're passing by, flowers droop and sigh, and I know the reason why. You're much sweeter, goodness knows, honeysuckle rose. Don't buy sugar, you just have to touch my cup. You're my sugar. It's sweet when you stir it up. When I'm taking sips from your tasty lips, seems the honey fairly drips. Your confection, goodness knows, honeysuckle rose.
Oh yeah, thank you, Treva.
You're welcome.
Yeah, the Myers are giving you a standing ovation.
Oh yeah, thank you.
That was great. And Treva, got to thank you again for being part of this whole project. To have you for both the preview and the Q&A, wonderful bookends. And you'll just be coming back for a bunch of other films along the way. So much.
I look forward to it. Yeah, we had this totally off the subject, but on the subject, Bill and I got into a great conversation about Jack Cole. So like going into Jack Cole land too.
Well, we can do Jack Cole as we move on to the diehards.
Okay.
So we want to thank all of you for being with us tonight, and we'll be back in 2 weeks for the Q&A on Bye Bye Birdie, which is October 1, Thursday at 7 p.m. You are adjourned, except for those diehards who just want to keep the party going, or keep the joint jumping if you prefer. Have a good weekend, everybody.
Nice to see you all. Thank you.